Hi, I'm Travis McDonald, Director of Architectural Restoration at Poplar Forest. Today we're going to talk about one other element about Jefferson and building Poplar Forest. I'm standing here in front of a number of different materials. Jefferson really was one of the most experienced builders by the time he came to do Poplar Forest. He had built Monticello #1 in the 1770s. He had rebuilt it in the 1790s, and he had studied construction wherever he was in the world. And he constantly compared different types of construction, different workers, processes, and different materials. So at Poplar Forest, we can see a lot of these trends that Jefferson was following to get the best materials. Sometimes he was using local materials like oak for structural materials, joists, rafters. He was also using a lot of the poplar wood from the old growth poplar forest. Some of that he used for moldings, interior moldings, but the good heartwood of old growth poplar was also as good on an exterior, just as good as old growth pine was. But this was also being used for moldings. We know he also used walnut for window muntins, window sash, and he said that this had a richer look if it was varnished rather than a painted material. Typically you would use a pine and making window sash, and you would paint it. He was using varnished walnut, just like he was using walnut for the doors in the house that had a varnish that would have given it a richer look and shown off the great grain variety of Virginia walnut. We know he's also ordering glass originally from Europe. He wanted the best Bohemian glass originally. Later, there is a crown glass manufacturing process in Boston, and he's getting crown glass from Boston. This was a bigger piece of glass for his windows than he could get locally here in Lynchburg or even in Virginia. So this glass had to come by ship to Richmond, the port, Richmond, and then come up the James River on bateau boats, which was the softer way to get it here instead of in a wagon. And Jefferson is constantly ordering more and more glass. We also know that he was using lead, which was used for flashings around chimneys. We also know he's using a sheet metal, which is a very thin iron that had to be painted. That was used for the valleys on the roof. And then late in the process, late in the life of Poplar Forest, he puts these tin shingles on the house, which replaced the wood chestnut shingles that were originally the roof covering. This is a really great new material because it's lightweight, it's fireproof, and it's easily installed. What he didn't understand was capillary action, where water could be drawn up under the shingles that only had a 2-inch lap. But still, this was another example of an innovative material that he was using on Monticello and at the University of Virginia. We also know that he's getting hardware, usually from Richmond merchants. A lot of this is handmade hardware, and some of it's even coming from England. The other more refined hardware is brass mortise locks that he's also getting from a Richmond merchant. And all of these things are choices that make the house as good as he can make it more modern, make it more up to date. The other thing that was very modern in the house was putting in an oak floor. And Jefferson refers to this as being the best thing they have in Europe, typically on floors. what made this European was not the oak, but it was the finish, an oil and a wax and a polish. And in fact, when Jefferson is renting a house in Paris, one of the servants was a guy who only polished the floors every day. And Jefferson and John Adams complain about how many different servants you need for a Parisian house. But this polished oak floor was really one of the most modern things in the house. Most American floors, even if they had an oak floor, would not have the finish and the polish. And one of the very few descriptions of the house was by an Englishman who said it had floors of polished oak. It was like a French chateau. This is also another material that was common. This is hemp rope. Hemp was grown on almost every plantation, used for rope, used for clothing, for slaves, used for sacks. The reason why it's so good is that it's one of the strongest natural fibers. We had to get this for our restoration process custom made in Holland, where there was a Dutch company that had been making hemp rope probably for hundreds of years. So all of these things are all part of the whole complex nature of poplar forest, where Jefferson is picking and choosing which materials he wants to put where in the house. And Jefferson, as a very good builder, always went with innovative materials and the best types of materials. And this was because in his day, you thought a house would stay in your family forever, and you wanted to build it once and build it right.